Hi friends, what would Warhammer be without the war? Well, I suppose it would just be hammer, but gosh darn it, that would be a bit boring. Unless of course you're some kind of toolophile or something, and I really hope that isn't something and I made that term up. But anyways, what would the war in Warhammer be without all the awesome INSANEO weapons in the setting? Probably just a bunch of crazy people screaming at each other. But we can see that at the local Pee-wee soccer game, so I'm certainly glad that 40k has its INSANEO weapons. So today, we're going to talk about the ranged weapons of 40k. And they're some of the craziest weapons in fiction. They aren't the craziest weapons in fiction, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise, but for being relatively common and standard equipped to normal due to the setting, they are quite insane. And before we get any further, I just want to make a quick interjection here to say that I have new stickers on the store page. I'm really proud of how they came out, so it'd be cool if you checked them out. They're pretty epic. Anyways though, back to the video. But anyways, let's get into it. And what better weapon to start with than the iconic workhorse of the Imperium, the single most important weapon in the Imperium, that's right, the las gun. And I'm not joking. The las gun is the single most important gun in the entire Imperium. Not the most powerful or holiest weapon, but without it, the Imperium would be even worse off than they are now, and they might not even exist. The las gun is a standard battle rifle of the Imperium, and as you would expect, it shoots lasers and is gun. Now these are stronger than your usual Star Wars-esque laser guns and work differently than like a Battletech beam. They basically emit a super intense beam of energy that vaporizes whatever it hits. So while it's joked to be a flashlight compared to all other 40k weapons, it's actually quite capable and is said to sever limbs, blast concrete, and even penetrate power armor with well-placed shots. Its primary weakness is against armored opponents, but it excels against flesh and can punch through armor with skilled shots or just sheer mass fire. But the las gun's true power is the logistical aspect. By Gilman's blue ultra balls, the las gun is a logistical gift from the heavens above. The las gun is legendary for its reliability, simplicity, and versatility. The las gun is basically a laser shooting brick. It's super easy to produce, easy to maintain, hard to actually break, and it does its job good enough, gosh darn it. This means you can take even the dumbest, backwaterist morons of the Imperium, teach them how to shoot a las gun in a few days, and if you found enough morons, then you got yourself a pretty darn dangerous fighting force. Oh, and this thing basically has limitless ammo. It takes power packs, which usually has about 150-ish shots depending on the power settings, which in itself is pretty nutty considering they're roughly the size of a standard 5.56 magazine. But even nuttier is that these can be recharged by basically anything, including solar or, famously, by tossing it in a fire and getting some anti-Xeno flashes for it. And it's not recommended to put your gun battery in a fire, but you can. And that's pretty cool. But the mere fact that the Imperium doesn't really have to worry about ammunition supply lines for its main infantry weapon is pretty insane. And is probably one of the ways the Imperium has managed to survive this long despite its incompetent leadership. And the las gun has also got many variants that fulfill common infantry weapon types like pistols, battle rifles, assault rifles, better rifles, worse rifles, snipers, miniguns, etc, etc. Of these variants, the Helgun's my favorite las variant, mostly due to its relation to my beloved Kazarkin, but they are straight up one of the best weapons in 40k, and I'm not even joking. It's basically just an up-armored las gun that fixes the las gun's main weakness of armor by shooting so gosh darn hard that it has more armor penetration than basically any other infantry weapon. The extreme armor penetration makes for a super deadly combo since las guns are already great against flesh, so busting through armor and vaporizing the fleshy dude inside is quite nice. And this is how Kazarkin are able to take down marines far easier than you would expect an unaugmented human could do. But this increased penetration comes at the cost of more energy and a bigger gun. That's why Kazarkin carry large power packs and get extra training on how to maintain their guns. However, you know a popular unit who does have giant power packs already would love to have more than 20-ish shots per mag and somewhat regularly fights against Space Marine leveled armored enemies. Oh yeah, the Space Marines! I'm just gonna say it, Helguns are straight up the perfect weapon for Space Marines. They have higher penetration, better ammo economy, and are arguably more damaging than a bolter, and the main drawbacks would hardly apply to the ultra capable Marines who already have fucking fusion reactors on their back. But with that being said, Space Marines should never and could never change their bolters since Bolters are more than just a weapon at this point. They've become a symbol of the Emperor's Angels of Death. Bolters aren't the weapons of the Marines because they're the most practical. They're the weapons of the Marines because they instantly convey the brutal and efficient nature of the Astartes. A Space Marine taking down an army with 30 exploding shots in like 30 seconds is just more striking and indicative of the Marine power fantasy. Simply put, bolters are just really badass, and 40k is a setting about being really badass. To switch the bolter would be like changing their iconic helmets. Oh wait, never mind. It would be like changing Darth Vader's iconic helmet. Blasphemy! But bolts aside and back to las, one other las variant that warrants its own mention is the las cannon. The las cannon is one of my favorite 40k weapons, and it's literally just a humongo las gun. It circumvents the las gun's main weakness of armor penetration by amping the power, similar to a hull gun, but just like 100 times harder. And it's the primary anti-infantry weapon of the Imperium. This massive power comes at a cost though, as it takes longer to cool off and recharge, and is obviously way bigger than a las gun. Duh. One thing I really do love is that the las cannons require a team of guardsmen to operate, while Marines can just shoulder the thing and blast shit on the run. It reminds me of grabbing the turret weapons as Master Chief. Always love to see a character running around with guns almost the size of themselves. Also, some call the las gun a blazooga, literally peak. Excuse me. I liked your massive bazookas. Huh, thanks, brother. Next up, let's talk about my favorite special weapon, the plasma gun. Plasma guns are one of the rarer weapons in 40k, except for in 10th where every guardsman and their mom has one, and they predictably shoot plasma. Plasma guns are very powerful for their size and arguably the most versatile of the special weapons class. It's a tad weaker than melta guns, but has a range comparable to grenade launchers. And this gun works by superheating liquid nitrogen, creating a magnetic field to hold it in ball form, and then shooting the plasma balls. Into your mother's mouth, that is. Ha, got him. But anyways, this plasma bolt, according to the Death Watch, is similar to solar flares in appearance and temperature, which is pretty nutty and basically never actually visually depicted. But this extreme power and moderate range means that the plasma guns excel against heavy infantry and even vehicles if need be. Plasma guns are also famous for their tendency to explode. However, this is usually due to user error. Plasma guns almost always have two variant fire modes, standard and overcharged. The standard mode usually being safe, but of course weaker, and the overcharged mode is risky but powerful. So, commonly, the plasma guns exploding is often due to many Imperials not having enough trigger discipline to prevent overheating, soldiers getting put into desperate situations where overheating is actually preferable to whatever else they're facing, the based mentality of always overcharge, or they simply don't know about the different fire modes. Also, sometimes the plasma gun explosion is depicted as the gun doing an emergency vent that maims or kills the user with a heat flush in order to protect the gun. Anyways, speaking of heat killing things, let's talk about the king of heat weapons, the melta gun. Another of my favorites. The melta gun is the most powerful handheld weapon in the Imperium, but is limited by its range due to heat dissipation. Melta guns work by basically making a fusion reaction and then venting the heat out of the killing end of the gun to literally melt whatever it's shot at. Or sometimes it's a funky microwave gun. It's a bit weird in lore. But whatever it is, two facts remain. Meltas are extremely devastating, and they operate on super space magic, so don't think about it. Melta guns are devastating against basically everything. Just ask Jordan. But their short range means that they're most commonly used by ambush commando squads, anti-vehicle squads, and close quarter battles like city fighting, boarding actions, or subterranean stealer hunting. The Melta's also got some variants. Most notable are the Inferno Pistol and Multi-Melta. The former is just a Melta pistol with a cool name, and the latter is literally two Melta guns taped to each other. This allows them to either fire faster or have a bit of a longer range when both melters are shot in conjunction. On the topic of microwave guns though, I present Volkite weapons. These fun little guys are Dark Age technology, and as such are very powerful weapons. They shoot little beams that violently ignite whatever it hits and can melt armor. They are probably the best all-around weapons for their size. They are extremely powerful and good against basically any target. Basically, their only weakness is their complexity, and they're basically the opposite of las guns as they are hard to manufacture and maintain. During the Great Crusade, the Emperor wanted to make the Volkites easier to manufacture so that it could be the main weapon of the Imperium. However, due to unfortunate circumstances, this didn't happen and we got to keep the much cooler standard weapon instead. However, jumping off of Volkites, another powerful weapon in 40k is the Grav Gun. This weapon is even rarer than Plasmas or Meltas, so rare in fact that GW refuses to give us this super cool weapon in any new kit. The Grav weapons work by shooting magic space particles that alter the target's gravitational field. It was originally developed for industrial purposes, but if set to higher gravity settings, it can be used as a devastating weapon. Turns out, altering the forces of nature with a funny green gun is pretty strong. Who knew? So, when set to Jumbo, the Grav Gun can crush victims beneath their own weight, crumpling armor, crushing structures, or exploding organs from within. This is what allows a Grav Gun to be so useful against armor and giant targets. It can also be used at lower settings to be the most overkill stun gun in existence, and this can come in pistol or cannon variants. Also, grenades, which is pretty fun. And then, next up, let's talk about the weapons in 40k that are basically just real-world weapons with the cute 40k skin. AKA, they're real weapons that are usually a bit less practical, but a bit more awesome. We got the auto guns, stub guns, flamers, shotguns, frag grenades, auto cannons, and mortars. Those, of course, being the 40k stand-ins for ballistic rifles, pistols, flamethrowers, shotguns, frag grenades, auto cannons, and mortars. While most of these are basically the same as their real-world counterpart, some do have some notable quirks. For example, flamers use promethium fuel that burns hotter and longer than any real-life fuel, making flamers far more deadly than real-life flamethrowers. The autocannon also has a notable variant in the assault cannon. The regular autocannon is very versatile and good against most targets, but it's most specialized against heavy infantry and light armor. But what if there's a lot of dudes I want to blast? Like, for example, a Terminator assaulting a giant horde of denim takers. Well, then you need an assault cannon. These are basically minigun autocannons. So, in a way, they're even more auto than the autocannon. They shoot a smaller caliber than the standard autocannon, but shoot much faster and can still take on armor just from sheer volume of fire. Plus, you get a wrist-mounted minigun. Coolest shit ever. But anyways, next up, the grenade launchers are essentially the same as modern ones, but can shoot the fictional crack grenades. Wait, crack grenades? Anyways, speaking of which, crack grenades are another popular armament named as such because they crack the armor of their targets with a powerful implosion and kill the nuts inside. Although they have a smaller lethal radius than a frag, the power more than makes up for it, and these make for surprisingly effective weapons against marines and light vehicles. Considering they're often standard equipment or can be used in grenade launchers, a guard squad can be surprisingly deadly if they use them right. And another deadly grenade, and perhaps the deadliest grenade, are the vortex grenades. These funky things basically create a mini warp rift, causing a devastating vortex that sucks in everything in its radius and destroys it. However, like most things warp-related, these things are rather unpredictable, and while they are devastating, they can be risky to use. And finally, let's talk about what everyone wants to hear, one of the most, if not the most, iconic weapons in 40k, the holy weapon and symbol of the Imperium's sheer brutality, the bolt gun. Bolt guns were invented by the Emperor himself and is a standard weapon of the Space Marines and later Sisters of Battle. It's seen as a holy symbol and is an intimidating weapon. The standard bolter shoots a 75 caliber explosive bolt that uses both gunpowder ignitions like conventional ballistic weapons, but also has a gyrojet mechanism that activates after it's fired. This means that the bolt has a more consistent velocity than a gyro gun, while also theoretically being able to achieve a higher velocity and range than a normal firearm. And also, contrary to a relatively popular misconception, bolters are not grenade launchers. They fire bolts designed to penetrate their target and then have a delayed explosion. So, likely, just like real armor-piercing tank rounds, they have a penetrator cap above the explosive charge so that it detonates inside of the target for maximum devastation. Along with its devastating firepower, it's also an extremely sturdy weapon, meaning that you can halo melee whip enemies all day if they happen to close in on you. The roar of the bolters becomes synonymous with certain doom and is widely feared across the galaxy. And the bolter being the Marines' primary armament, of course it has many variants and ammo types. So many that it deserves its own video down the line. But the key ones are the heavy bolter, storm bolter, and bolt pistol. The heavy bolter is a larger variant with a much higher rate of fire and a larger caliber. It's used by Devastator Marines, Sisters of Battle, and guard heavy weapon teams as a powerful anti-infantry weapon. Then the bolt pistol is just a bolter but pistol sized. It usually uses the same bolt caliber but has a lower initial velocity due to the shorter barrel. Although theoretically, due to the gyrojets, it should have a comparable max velocity and range. Although it's hard to shoot pistols, so that may account for its shorter range in lore and tabletop. But finally, the coolest bolter variant in my opinion, the Storm Bolter. This is the standard weapon of the coolest Space Marine variant in my opinion, the Terminators. Literally just two bolters strapped together, given a stub nose and a humongo mag. They have an extreme rate of fire and are capable of shredding nearly any target and are especially dangerous in close quarters. But even outside close quarters, they excel at suppressing enemy forces as the Terminators make their steady advance. Storm bolters are devastating, but rarely used outside of Terminators and vehicles due to their unwieldiness and extreme ammo consumption. But this doesn't stop some madmen from utilizing the weapons. Badass! But that's all I got for today. There's so many weapons in 40k, I'm sure I missed some, so comment them below. If this one does well, I'll probably make us a loose 3-part series with Imperial melee weapons and obscure weapons, and then Xenos weapons. Anyways though, let me know what your favorite gun in 40k is, and why you like it. Thank you for watching, and big thanks to the patrons who help support the channel. And as always, please like, comment, subscribe, and consider sharing it to all your crazy ass weapons. Thanks! And I guess virus bombs would technically be an iconic ranged weapon. Space to Planet is certainly a range, so it's a giant WMD that explodes and spreads a mega virus to exterminate us or at least mega hurt a planet. Also, las cannons and all las weapons for that matter don't do the typical sci-fi pew-pews. They make a distinct crack similar to sharp thunder sound.